So the VA did a study, and they said 13% of recently separated veterans report troubled financial status. And then 4 out of the top 20 risk factors for a suicide attempt are financial related.
Welcome to Where Money, the show devoted to supporting our brothers and sister veterans. I'm Patrick Murphy.
And I'm Dan Kunze.
Today, we're talking one of the veterans' most significant financial decisions, buying a home. In today's market, it's more important than ever to know how to navigate that process, to use your benefits to the fullest, but also to avoid costly mistakes. We're going to share homeownership journeys, talk about the challenges that folks face, and later in the show, we'll be joined by Josh Andrews, who's an advice director at USAA, a certified financial planner, and a retired Air Force officer, who his work focuses on helping our brothers and sister veterans strengthen their financial security. So let's get into it. Dan,
all right, buddy, let's do it.
The number one wealth building tool for folks in the middle class beyond is owning a home.
I think the number one wealth building tool in the history of mankind has been owning property and real estate. And I mean, thankfully, so let's break that down for right. Everybody should own a home if they're capable of owning a home, if they know they're able to and the capacity to do it. Not everybody has access to the VA home loan, which I know I bought a home using, and I know you've bought a home using. And that is just a benefit that I think we oftentimes sleep on and how important that is. And there's also some stigma about it. One of our friends, Craig Cummings, had written an article in the Wall Street Journal. It was featured in Wall Street Journal article. It's like, hey, there's this reputation that VA home loans were hard to use, but that's like totally not the truth anymore. It's there, it's available, but it also it really reduces that barrier to entry into your first home.
Yeah. And I think for a lot of folks, like, listen, a lot of Americans want to buy a home, et cetera, right? But the cost of doing business is 20%. It's 20% down. So if you an average home $350,000, well, 20% of $350 is $70,000. If you don't have $70,000 sitting around, now there's ways around it. You can get PMI, but that means it's a higher interest rate, and you're paying off basically, a penalty that not have 20% down. But for veterans to be able to get through that, you and I talk about, a couple of things. One, your network is your net worth. We talk about leveraging what your military service has done for you, leveraging such as the GI Bill, leveraging the VA home loan. But the VA home loan often is a veteran's first chance to become an entrepreneur. You did that. Walk us through that process and how you did that.
Yeah. So I bought my first house using a VA home loan. And there's rules on it that you're allowed to buy another one, especially if you leave the first house as a conventional, you're allowed to reuse your benefit for another VA home. So then I used the next one for it, and I transitioned that as well. And then the third one, the family home that I bought, I used the VA home loan during COVID to buy my first family home. And I put zero money down. I think my interest rate was 2.85 back in 2020 or something like that, which was crazy stupid. Like
I know, I bought my 2.5%. I got
whatever number it was stupid. But like, I know so many people that have used the benefit of the VA loan, both to secure their primary residence, but also to secure what has become either rental properties or some other investment properties. And it's perfectly within the eligibility guidelines of the VA. It's what you can do if you want to. And I think the other point that you made and that we make is like, to save $70,000 in your 20s when you're making $65 to $100, whatever you're making in, I don't know, $46,000, $65,000, right? To be able to save $70,000 to put a legitimate down payment down on a house right now, it's very difficult. If you can put zero money down with no penalty, which the VA allows you to do, that's a pretty good benefit.
Yeah. And, you and I both are avid readers. When you read books about people who become millionaires, et cetera, a lot of them, over 1% of them will get it through real estate, through home ownership, et cetera, and assets. I mean, I look at, people in America, their number one asset is really their home.
Yeah. It's funny. This isn't about my VA home loan. This is just about my personal strategy, right? So I own a home in Nashville. I own a home outside of Philadelphia. I'm building a home, developing that property in Nashville. The reason I'm developing that property is because they've got an affordable housing problem. So I constructed a home within a certain price range because I know that there's a demand for it that's out the roof, right? The reality is that house is still out of touch for people that are working in working jobs. So the question is, all right, where do we live? How do we build these homes and communities when sometimes we're out of touch with the housing environment, even the financial possibilities of folks, right? that I think continues to go back to, we've had people on the show talking about first responders and how we extend benefits to those folks, how we extend benefits to nurses and teachers and educators. Like, that's what we need to start to think through as we think about how do you actually secure the sorts of properties moving forward.
Yeah, yeah. How about as far as, we're going to have Josh Andrews on later today, an episode. We're going to talk to him. He's a certified financial planner. He's an Air Force Academy graduate, and he advises our brothers and veterans. We do tell them, don't get over your skis. Don't bite off more than you could chew. We've had other folks on War Money, people like Lloyd, Bradley, who was a Wharton graduate, Air Force Academy graduate, who pooled his money with his other Air Force Academy graduates. A lot of them were football players there, and they bought rental properties, and that's how they did, a side business.
Lloyd's a great dude.
Right, right. And he's just crushing it. But, what have you seen within the veteran community of folks using this as their first step into entrepreneurship? I know you talked about your journey, but other folks that have done it.
You mean buying a home?
Yeah, buying property, whether they flip it as an Airbnb, as a rental property. Or...
I have so many of the, you go through different schools, right? And I was a little bit older when I went through the basic training, and I was a little bit older when I went through officer school. So like I was a little bit out of that window that most people were on.
Yeah, you had a great Substack on it this week. I commented on it.
Yeah. Well, it's called Why I Enlisted. But like everyone that was a little bit older and had experienced a few other things, and they went to their first duty assignments, ended up buying a property at their first duty assignment. And it wasn't like a bad property. They would go somewhere within 45 minutes or an hour, somewhere in a nicer area, nicer neighborhood, and they'd use their VA home loan and they'd buy a property in that area. In Washington State, they'd buy it in some of the nicer areas, Tacoma, Seattle, Clarksville, they'd buy it in Nashville, North Carolina, they'd buy it in Pinehurst, like these certain areas that they would buy the houses in. And what they would do is that would start to create your equity wheel, right? And your equity wheel means, hey, if I can just start getting equity on this house because it appreciates, right? That then allows me to go buy the next house. I can sell that previous house. The problem is the barrier to entry to your first home is so high right now. So what we need to do is reduce the burden of the entry to the first home, let the equity of your home take over the next second, third, and fourth houses. That's really what I've seen the majority of my friends do from a very pragmatic perspective. Never mind the really big entrepreneurship side of it. That's just the like, how do I get started on this journey, and how do I get started in wealth creation using my home? That's how they did it.
Yeah.
And you did it too. So I mean, you never bought a home with you bought
yeah, no doubt. And listen, when I left active duty after my second combat deployment, I didn't have the at that time I bought my last home was $300,000 home. I didn't have $60,000 sitting around, right? And so I was able to use the VA home loan. Now that was my then wife, and then she kept the home and she sold it for double what we bought it for, right? Now we put a lot of work into it, et cetera. But still, I think one of the undercurring things you're saying, though, is location, location, location. When people are looking, whether I'm on active service or whether I'm a veteran, if you're going to make this an investment, make sure it's a property where the value is going to increase. It's not where there's a glutton of homes and I can't sell them. It is so important to do your homework on it.
Yeah, it's so right. Actually, like my the only thing I'll disagree with you, your network is your net worth, but your 5 most important people in your network is really what indicates your success. It's the specific group of people that you spend the most amount of time with are the ones that drive the overwhelming amount of your success. It's the same with picking stocks, and it's the same with picking real estate. You can pick 20 different stocks, and 15 of them can lose. That's okay, but your 5 have got to win. It's the same with buying real estate. You've got to buy real estate in good locations, and the axiom like location, location, location. That's true, but what we also have to consider is not buying a home. Deciding not to do that is a good decision. Just make sure that you're investing your money or keeping it to the side to create some level of leverage for you when you do decide that you need one. Like that's what we want to say. Like if you're going to rent, great. There's a lot of value in renting. I very much agree with renting too. But if you're going to rent, know that you don't have to put as much money into that rental as you would into your home. So create a home fund or create some other fund to be able to support the purchase of your first home, leveraging the VA bill, leveraging the VA home loan, leveraging whatever mechanism you have to be able to build the first house, and don't make it a crappy house. Buy a house in a nice area and then fix it if you need to, but buy a house in the nicest area you can.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of folks that because you get, that housing allowance, I remember when I was a professor.
They just spend it the
West
same.
Point,
It's a Tacoma or some car.
I remember I was like, oh my God, they're gonna pay me $1,000 to move off post. I got a place for $500 a month, and I'm like, and this is legal, right? And they're like, yeah. And I went, I was making sure because I sleep well at night because I don't mess around. But I was like, man, and just it was like all I had to do is get roommates. It was a 3-bedroom house. I was like, it worked out great. But I would say there are a lot of folks who get house poor or rent poor. What does that mean? That means that when Captain Murphy was teaching at West Point, I could have got a nicer place than I got.
Yeah.
But then I wouldn't be able to save the money.
One of the dangerous things about the mortgage calculator, though, it's like you plug in your information, they tell you what you can get to. They don't also say that when you do buy this, you've got to pay for your utilities, you've got to pay for repairs, you got to pay for all the other things. You got to pay to furnish the house. You got to pay for all those things, and you don't really always consider that when it's your first house.
Yeah. So, all right, listen. We've covered homeownership matters that basically that our brothers and veterans deal with, especially today's housing market, which is, not great right now. But, you have to ask yourself, how do you navigate these challenges and come out ahead? We're going to dig into that when we come back with someone who's made it his mission to guide our brothers and sisters towards stronger financial futures. His name is Josh Andrews. He's from USAA. I'll be right back right after this on Warrior Money. All right, welcome back to Warrior Money. As mentioned earlier, Josh Andrews is the advice director for USAA and a certified financial planner with a master's in financial planning from Kansas State University and an engineering degree from the United States Air Force Academy. He served 20 years in the Air Force, 11 on active duty and 9 in the reserves, retiring about 5 years ago in 2020. But today, he works to ensure that our brother and sister veterans and fellow service members have the tools and the knowledge they need to make confident, informed financial decisions. Josh, welcome to Warrior Money.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
So for those who are not veterans, and they might not know this, Dan and I are both Army veterans. You're Air Force. The Air Force is like our little brother because it used to be the Army Air Corps. So as a little brother, welcome to Warrior Money, man.
Thank you. I will accept that. Sometimes the little brother wins, though.
That's right. I'm the youngest of 3, so and
he knows all about it.
I got lumped up growing up, so yeah.
He knows all about it.
Hey, listen, we talk about what bluff, right? Bottom line up front. The number one wealth building tool to reach the middle class and beyond is your home ownership, right? You get a chance to help our brothers and sister veterans. Walk us through what that process is like and why it's so important.
So the process of buying a home can be complicated. And, the question is, as a military member, should I buy a home at each assignment, right? You go there, you want to feel part of the community. Should you buy a home at each assignment? Well, in most cases, USA believes and recommends that you should not as an active duty service member. The reason is because it can often take 3+ years for the home to appreciate enough to offset the selling costs. And we know, and y'all being in the military, you move every 2 to 3 to 4 years. And so I've heard so many stories of military members who lost money by buying a home at each duty station. Now, while there are stories of those who broke even or those who have even made money, most people lose money or they become like myself because I bought a home at Eglin Air Force Base when I was stationed there flying F-15s, the world's greatest air superiority fighter. I could not sell my home because I was underwater. And so I had to become a reluctant landlord. And that comes with additional costs and additional expenses.
No doubt about it.
Yeah, that's a really good perspective. Like when you're early in your career, especially as an early officer in your career, and you got money for the first time, everybody's like, I want to buy a new house at each duty statement that I go to. I'm gonna get rich and be a landlord. And now we're at the 10 to 12 year mark, and they're like, you know what? I think we're gonna sell that. We're gonna try and sell that house in Alabama or that house in Florida, and they find themselves in a little bit of trouble doing that. By and large.
It is because, as a military member, you never know where the military is going to move you. And there's no guarantee that you're going to move back to that home, even if you desire, because a lot of times we go where the job is. And so wherever the job is when you get out of the military, that's where you're going to settle down. And so that's why it often makes most financial sense, and it's a wise financial decision to just not buy a home and then wait till you get settled in your civilian location. You're at a more stable job. You're going to live there for a longer time. And then you can really have that dream of home ownership.
Yeah. Dan and I also talk about, leveraging the experience in the military for your own personal wealth. So the two greatest basically benefits you get are the VA home loan and the GI Bill. So let's focus on the VA home loan. It is remarkable when you look at rates being as high as they are, et cetera, and really the cost of doing business on home ownership is really the 20% down, unless you go PMI, which is not usually advised in my opinion, but I'm not here to give financial advice, but when you look at the fact that our brother and sister veterans could buy a home without that 20% down when they're settled, when they don't have massive credit card debt, when they're ready to make that commitment, what is it that, those folks realize when they go to you and realize that they're not alone and you're there to help?
So when it comes to the VA home loan, it's a wonderful benefit. There's benefits you get from your military service, and we're going to talk about the two in the post 9/11 GI Bill being a very, very important one. But the VA home loan is there, so take advantage of it. It's a good benefit, right? But the thing is, from a financial advice standpoint, you need to make sure, no matter if you're putting money down, but if you're not putting money down, that can cause you to maybe have a higher payment. That can cause financial stress. And you really need to weigh the benefit of how much home am I buying? How much is it costing me? And is it limiting my ability to achieve other financial goals, such as paying down debt, save for retirement?
Yeah. Dan and I are both like kind of.
We were talking about this in our last our last episodes.
Yeah, about Dave Ramsey, not that, but I know at least I think for your homes that you bought, I have two. Is the whole I'm going to go 15-year mortgage, right? And to make sure. Now again, some people to do 30 and then they pay it off quicker and stuff. There's different ways to skin that cat, but for that lower interest rate, that's kind of where I try to get my bang for the buck.
Yeah. Hey, you did 11, 12 years active duty Air Force. Then you transitioned to reserves. Can you talk a little bit about your journey from active duty Air Force into USAA? What was it about? Because one of the things we talk about a lot is like, how do you find your purpose in your post-military service? How do you transition with intent? All those great things. Talk a little bit about your transition, why you found a home at USAA.
So for me, I decided at about the 11 to 12 year point, it was time to establish connections with my family. Even when I wasn't deployed, I averaged being gone 25% of every year. That last assignment, I was actually flying MQ-9s. And so I was doing daily combat missions in Afghanistan, and that takes a toll on the family. And so my wife was feeling like a single mom. So for me, it was a time to step back from the ops tempo that active duty had. But I did not feel like my service was done, right? I did not feel like my time in the military was done. And so that's where a combination of joining USAA, which is a company founded by military members, focused on military members, and joining the U.S. Air Force Reserves allowed me to feel like I continue both service in both places. I can serve in the military when I did my reserve duty, but I also feel like I'm serving the brothers and sisters in arms when I show up every day to work for USAA. So for me, the purpose and intent was met with those two avenues.
Yeah, sure seems like the best of both worlds in that scenario.
What was
your reserve assignments? What did you do?
So for my reserve assignments, what I did is I was in charge of Air Force Academy admissions for South Texas and Central America.
That's
so
really
we
cool.
were the second largest region outside of Europe. So anyone who wanted to go to the Air Force Academy from our region either came through us, talked to us, we mentored them, and really kind of helped establish that pipeline of future Air Force leaders.
That's really cool. All right. So what is your job at USAA right now? And what does it mean for people that look you up and they're like, I don't know. I don't exactly know what that is.
Yeah. So my job is an advice director. And so what my daily responsibility is to ensure our military members are equipped with the financial advice and education they need so that they can make informed financial decisions to achieve their financial security. So when you look at USA's mission, we really have three key components: competitive products, exceptional service, and trusted advice. And so me and my team are really charged with making sure that trusted advice portion of USA's mission comes to life in the lives of our members.
Yeah, which is incredibly important because you have a fiduciary duty, right, to your members. I'm a member of USAA, full disclosure, and I know we joked earlier about the Air Force being like the Army's little brother. But my brother served in the Air Force. My daughter just enlisted.
That's right.
Comes in Air Force as a young
congratulations.
Cadet Maggie Murphy
there you go.
down there. But to our earlier point, how did that transition piece? When you look at your colleagues from the Air Force Academy, when you look at your coworkers, the fact that you have a purpose-driven life, right, and that you work for a great company like USAA, you're helping your brothers and sisters maybe utilize the VA home loan, maybe not, depending on, their circumstance. Where have you seen other maybe folks fall through the cracks, and how are you trying to bridge that gap?
So I think a lot of people, when we think about maybe fall through the cracks or difficult transition from military to civilian life, is because they didn't plan for it, right? Dan, I was listening to one of your podcasts, and you had a statement, and I loved it. It was sustainable luckiness comes from planning. And USA, we believe a successful military to civilian transition comes from planning. 100% of people who join the military leave the military. So let's plan for it, both from a career standpoint, but also from a financial standpoint. And a lot of times you can take financial actions ahead of time, and it's really going to impact the career and the mental well-being side of it as well.
Yeah, when I think about your story, I think about I see USAA, Navy Federal, and probably Pentagon Federal Credit Union at every base or installation that I've ever been to, somewhere in the facility, right?
Yep.
So I have this is not about anybody else besides hey, you're brand new to a service. How do I think about what I would get at USAA? And then how do I think about transitioning out of it? What is your best practices from hey, I don't even have a banking relationship yet now, to then, hey, how do I plan for post-military service with a banking relationship? How do you think about that?
So when I think about that, you need to understand the aspects of military life. And so military life means we move a lot. We are TDY, so we travel a lot, we deploy, and we go overseas. And a lot of times I'm not there, so I need to make sure everything is done automatically for me. So as you choose a bank that fits your lifestyle. And so that's why I chose USAA when I was a cadet at the Air Force Academy, because it fit my lifestyle. We have the online banking. We have the ability to bank wherever the military moves you, and it just fits my lifestyle. But as you transition, that's where the advice comes in, right? Is that we have people who have gone through the transition before. We have people who have done this. We have people who've done it successfully, and we have a lot of lessons learned. And then you can rely on the advice that is given by your bank, in this case, for me, USAA, because it's going to help you transition with success.
Yeah. How about as far as one piece of advice that you would give, as we have about 200,000 active service members, that means reservists as well, and military spouses transition every year. We live by that ethic, leave no one behind. What advice do you give them so they don't fall through the cracks?
I would say the first one is don't underestimate the value of a transition fund. And so what a transition fund is, a transition fund, right? It's a pot of money that enables you to provide for yourself as you transition from military to civilian life. It's worth about 6 to 12 months of living expenses, and this is an above your emergency fund, right? Leaving the military for most people is not an emergency, so it's planned for it. And here's why that's important. What I found out, and I'm sure y'all can relate to this, whether I have a job or not, my kids like to eat. Whether I have a job or not, they like to have a roof over their head. And no matter how much I asked, USAA was not going to let me show up in a flight suit every single day to work. All right. I had to buy civilian clothes, and civilian clothes, work appropriate civilian clothes, cost money. And so that fund is there to provide for all those type of expenses until that job comes in, because if not, you're going to be going into debt. But one thing we found the most of is that a lot of times we hear stories from veterans who took the first job that came along, not because it's the job they wanted, but because they needed income. And if they just had a little bit of pot of money to float them a few more months, they could have found that job that they really, really wanted that would have been better for their family, but they just needed the income. And that's what the transition transition fund is there for.
That's a really good advice. And I think that's the first time I've heard transition fund in this conversation.
Yeah, I think it's right. And I like the fact
it's not an emergency.
It's not an emergency fund, right?
Like that idea.
Can I just ask this last thing? I know we got to go, but I'm dying. I want to applaud you. You talked about USAA, and being a part of a values-based organization like you are. one of the number one, reasons why people do fall through the cracks and get mental stress and sometimes make really bad decisions is the financial stress. USAA isn't just having you on the front lines helping our brothers and sisters. They're also leading that for what's called the Face to Fight. The Face to Fight initiative is to end veterans homelessness. Why is that important? I'm sorry, not homelessness, veteran suicide, because we've lost 120,000 veterans since 9/11, death by suicide. USAA and Humana, and they're saying this is not a whole of government approach. This isn't, AVA, what are you up to? This is a whole nation approach. Why is financial readiness and financial discipline so important for your mental and physical health?
It's critical. And I actually have a study right here that I'm going to read to make sure I get it right. So the VA did a study, and they said 13% of recently separated veterans report troubled financial status. That's not difficulty, that's troubled financial status. In active duty U.S. soldiers, 23% reporting having financial problems in the 24 hours preceding a suicide attempt. That's almost one quarter. And then 4 out of the top 20 risk factors for a suicide attempt are financial related. Yeah. So when you think about the transition, it's a stressful time. The longer you've been in the military, the bigger the change it is, the more stressful it can be. But then you add the financial stress on top of that, which not only impacts the family well-being, but the mental well-being, right? Which Face the Fight you brought up. It's kind of this perfect storm of events that can lead to these decline in mental well-being. And I think one reason we're seeing the high mark of veteran suicide, which is what Face the Fight is trying to prevent.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. Hey, Josh.
Yeah, I really appreciate that.
Appreciate you joining us on Worry Money, man.
Great.
You're awesome, and we're looking forward to seeing you out there. And thank you for doing what you do. And I do think that because you give that advice and you lead people down the right path, you're frankly saving some lives out there so they don't make bad decisions. So God bless you, and God bless your team there at USAA. Thank you, Josh. So listen, hey, that's going to wrap up our show. So listen, subscribe, review Worry Money on Apple Podcasts, on YouTube, on Spotify, or follow us on Yahoo Finance. I'm Patrick Murphy.
And I'm Dan Kunze. We'll see you again next week.
This content was not intended to be financial advice and should not be used as a substitute for professional financial services.